All right, joining me on the Digital Revolution with Jim Kunkel is Barbara Whitman, and she's from the Digital Wisdom Collective. Barbara, if you could do a favor, if you could give a background on yourself, and also please talk about Digital Wisdom Collective.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me this morning. Um, Barbara Whitman. I was born and raised in Germany. Maybe my accent gives me away a little bit. Um, and for 25 years, and most of it was in Germany and in Europe, I was running my own software development business and consulting business. And I was coming in when digital transformation was going wrong. And meaning, and it wasn't just the light damage projects, it was the everyone ran away and they declared it dead kind of things. Um, so I came in and, I uncluttered and I fixed and I made a name for myself to doing that. Um, so that is how I got thinking about what is really going wrong and how things can go better. And then 10 years ago, I met my husband, who's American, and, we flipped the coin and I picked up and I moved. So I'm now north of Denver, Colorado. And with the move to the US, I switched more into a interim CIO strategy role. So I pretty much covered a very broad bandwidth of things, from very high level to really down in the nitty gritty. And what I have seen over and over again, and that's what really prompted me to start the Digital Wisdom Collective, is that it's never a technology issue. Whenever things go wrong, it is usually a people issue. And I don't want to say that in a disrespectful way, but it is the same patterns over and over again, that usually the answers are within the organization. And it does not really help you to add on more external consultants to try and declutter and fix things. It is about empowering the people that are in the organization, give them a voice and a seat at the table so they can add to a solution. So what I did with the Digital Wisdom Collective is basically packaging up my best practice from 25 years of fixing broken things and turn it into an empowerment for leaders and also for organizations to go about things in a more holistic way, so they can not only do transformation from within, but also innovate from within with less consulting dependency.
And when it comes to, we're going to be covering, mindset before machines, digital transformation, how it can fail without human infrastructure. Why is that topic? Why does it matter so much now? And also, could you talk a little bit about the human gap in digital transformation that we're experiencing at this time?
Mm-hmm. So digital transformation, and the statistics are out there. At this point, still about 70% of all initiatives fail. Because we have not figured out digital transformation, now we simply call it AI transformation. We just slap a different word in front, and then we feel that it's going to go better. That's even going worse. That's failing at close to 90% of all projects right now. So this is sort of where we stand. We're just exchanging, the first word every time, but we have never really dug into what it means to transform. We always look at things just from a technology angle, and it really is so much more, because it involves culture, it involves people, it involves the dynamic of how we collaborate and work together. And why this becomes so important right now is because we have AI in the mix. And that is the huge buzzword that is just, bobbing around in every room I walk into. And people think that this is the unicorn that's going to fix everything. And instead of that, it really shows the ugly underbelly of every organization, and it will show you pretty bluntly all the gaps you have in people, in data, in organization, in how you collaborate, how you innovate. So that's why it becomes so much more important. And if we don't touch the human angle now, as AI is getting upgraded at a crazy, crazy speed, we need to see that we continuously upgrade our humans as well and really make them into co-creators with technology. That has always been the angle, but again, with AI, it just kind of all bubbles up and becomes more apparent and more urgent.
Yeah, Barbara, this is going to be a great episode, and we're going to have this opportunity to really talk about the mindset, the infrastructure, and also sustainable changes that need to happen in organizations and also in this sphere related to digital transformation. So, Barbara, let's talk about the myth of tech first transformation. One of the most common misconceptions that I run in, and I know you run into this every single day, is that companies and leaders say, oh, intelligent technologies, it's going to fix everything. Can you talk a little bit about that misconception and also why it is so dangerous?
Oh man, I gotta see where I start because there's so much to say about that. So the biggest misconception out there is that we're just going to add a new tool or the new ERP or the latest AI, and then everything is going to be happy. And that is, the biggest thing that I see. And that largely lies in the issue that strategy and C-level is not really aligned with what is already there. So it is a misalignment of what we have and where we want to go. And that, in my mind, is simply a mapping issue. And it's also an issue that the CIO or the head of IT needs to have a seat at the table and needs to be part of every decision, especially on a strategy level. The other piece that I see a lot, that the voices from the middle of the organization that are executing initiatives are not heard. And they will tell you pretty bluntly if something is possible or not, if something makes sense or not, because they are dealing with it every day. They have a pretty good view of it. So these voices need to be brought to the table when there's a prioritization going on, when there's a new decision of things going on. And sometimes I feel like technology is treated like the next toy to put in a garage. And if you look at that garage, it's pretty freaking cluttered, and you do not know what's in the very back corner of it. And when I step into positions as an interim CIO, that's usually the first thing I do. And that is the biggest saving potential that companies have because they're paying for things they don't even remember they have. The other piece that I see a lot is we're going to hire a consultancy and we are going to bring a big name in and they are going to do great. And I have seen too many times that, they don't. What will happen is that if the organization per se is not ready for this next step in their journey, the consultants will just milk you like a cow. Sorry, consulting colleagues, that needed to be said. So you need to take a little bit of an inventory and you need to be ready. Even when consultants come in, and don't get me wrong, it's a good thing, but they need a little bit of guidance too. So you need to have a layout. You would never build a house without an architecture plan. You would never build a house without seeing if, the static is going to hold, if I put on an additional floor. So you need to have a building plan and you need to be able to get people to look at it and say, oh yeah, this is what we're building. Great.
Barbara, thank you for going into such depth and detail about that. Let's talk about the cost of ignoring cultural readiness and leadership alignment. What experience have you had related to the aspects of this readiness and also to when you have leadership that might be aligned or misaligned?
Well, and I'm sure there's a bunch of studies out there. If leadership is not aligned and if there's no cultural readiness, projects will, for the most part, fail because of that. Because what happens is what what I call a shared mental model has never been established. The understanding of why we're doing this and how we're doing it and who's doing what, and just aligning all the assumptions and expectations, that is usually jumped over because, you just go into, oh yeah, let's buy this, let's sign on the dotted line, and then let's just come up with a project plan and go. They never take the time to really understand the problem. So if you look at statistics, and PMI has done pretty extensive studies on that, if you combine, projects being delayed, the cost of misalignment and collaboration, and simply not talking about the same thing, it amounts to almost being a 10% cost for the full IT budget, which is pretty immense. And that is very conservative. So I would even rank that higher. So, mid-sized company, 15 to 20 million in an IT budget for the year, that comes up to be a pretty hefty number. And again, that's not taking everything into account. So if you think at better alignment could actually make you faster and also save you cost at the end of the day, it is really irritating to me why so many companies rather wait until something fails and then miraculously they have the funds to fix it. Whereas you could really be proactive and prevent this all along.
Now, Barbara, when it comes to human infrastructure defined, I had the opportunity to really research and learn a lot about what your definition is. For the audience, could you kind of explain a little bit about your definition of human infrastructure? What does it mean in this context?
Mm-hmm. So the human infrastructure to me is something that needs to live on top of any technology infrastructure. So as we are building out a server structure and connections between them and do continuous upgrades, we need to do the same with a human infrastructure. And starting with that, you need to find out who are your core players in the middle of the organization. And that, to me, is super important because in the middle of the organization, that is the place where you cannot delegate complexity anymore. They just need to deal with it. They need to execute. And they are usually the quiet ones that really see a lot but don't really want to speak up. So, in other words, I'm sure everyone in the organization can think of one or two people or maybe more that are the ones that everyone goes to when, there's a decision to be made. There is a question to be asked. They hold the trust of many stakeholders in the organization. So we want to find those and we want to train them to adopt a growth mindset, or how we call it, a circular mindset, because human infrastructure is based on circular thinking. It's not a linear way of things anymore, because linearity fails in complexity, and this is where we stand. So circular mindset means you need to understand your own superpower, and you need to understand how to stand your ground, how to facilitate, and how to show up and bring people together. So this is an important function. It doesn't mean that you have to train everyone in your organization, but you need to have the stewards of this new thinking that are basically creating the web of people that are actually building that human infrastructure. Once you have several people with that new mindset in your middle organization, it will create ripples, because people will get intrigued and they're like, wow, how that meeting went a lot better. How did that happen? What did you do? So you cannot really push people into it. You need to make them curious, and you need to have a couple of front runners. And mindset really is the core issue, but that means that you need to clean up yourself, because human infrastructure only evolves if you evolve as a leader. And that means looking at your own limiting beliefs, at things that you thought were true for so many years, Because if you're in a place where your own buttons don't get pushed in a meeting, that's when it gets interesting, and that's when you can really facilitate innovation and change in a good way. The other piece in human infrastructure is that we all know, but we hardly really leverage and execute on, and that is a common values structure. The values that are grounding us, that are telling us why we're actually doing something, and that also help us to define decision patterns and, a little bit of a, I don't want to say governance structure, that sounds so rigid, but a little bit of a framework on how we act together. And and lastly, it really is about building better collaboration and really breaking down the silos that have been stopping us. So it is encouraging really a cross organizational conversation and really thinking end to end and beyond. The thing about it is, though, it's hard to build it in-house because your organization right now is an echo chamber. It is hard to implant a couple of people that will think in a new way. That's why we do take these people out and train them in a cross-industry environment in our collective, where they can really upgrade themselves, they can try themselves out. To me, it is something so wild that we are testing software, we're upgrading software constantly, and we are so anal about testing it before we set it live. Well, we don't do that with humans, right? We send them to some training and then it's like, well, here, off you go, just use it now. So human infrastructure needs a practice ground, and it needs a safe space where people can really try themselves out, so they actually have the muscle to go back into their organization and start building that infrastructure in-house.
Oh, perfect. So what I kind of take away from what you just said is there's an important aspect for the collaboration and the evolution of human infrastructure related to digital transformation, that there needs to be acceptance and adoption of emotional intelligence, psychological safety, and also adaptive leadership. Could you talk a little bit about those three and why they are so critical to that human infrastructure?
Emotional safety is a huge piece. And that is usually why things fail. And emotional safety essentially is trust. And trust needs to be earned, it's not given. But that also is founded in trusting yourself. And that's why it is so important for us to have a safe space in our collective where people can really build that trust in themselves and strengthen that muscle. So they can go back and be a little bit infectious about, giving trust maybe a little bit ahead of its time and invite others to follow along. The other piece for shared trust is truly the shared values. That to us is a really, really important piece as a foundation. So that as a structural piece, and then of course the adaptive leadership piece on top, which is largely grounded in really elevating your mindset and learning more about you, and that will inform the organization that you are leading. And I forgot what the third one was. Sorry.
We were talking about emotional intelligence, psychological safety, and adaptive leadership.
Yes, emotional intelligence. That is a term a little bit underrated these days because we are so focused on upgrading our knowledge about technology, but we don't really have any places that give a chance to practice what is very human and where we can be vulnerable. I also believe we need to start thinking differently about how we train people, because if it is an in-house training and it's a one-off, no one will actually be vulnerable and show up and say what I always wanted to ask, because you want to look your best. So that in itself is a little bit of a conundrum. And that's exactly why we have created a space where people can come to, and they can be vulnerable. They can really try out what it means when you are trusted and when you are in a safe space. And what we call digital wisdom, that's basically a leadership paradigm that is built on very human capabilities that we really need to rediscover and relearn. And this is why what we do is an ongoing practice community. And you are staying part of it, and you keep upgrading, because that's also what we do with technology.
In the when you were going through and talking about human infrastructure, you talked about the role of trust and also to having that shared purpose in digital transformation related to the company or the organization on the human infrastructure side. How critical is communication? Does it help in the aspect of transparency, breaking down silos, or is there more to the communication aspect?
Communication is a really important piece, and just having the ability to ask good questions. That's one piece, and the other piece is to be a good listener, and that is two aspects that we don't really train anymore, or we don't give ourselves permission, because there is no permission for pause in anything. We are expected to have instant solutions right when something is dropped into our laps. And what we are really practicing with people is to take that pause, to ask better questions, to really understand, and to be a good listener, because the solution really is in the room. So communication is a lot about listening.
Barbara, I appreciate all that you are covering so far. Now let's make a shift, let's say a mindset shift, and talk about leaders and also teams. The first question I have for you is, how do you go from control to co-creation and the aspect of empowering digital fluency?
Mm-hmm. So change starts with one. That is our motto. And it really starts with changing the mindset of several key leaders that are influencing the execution of projects, and possibly also the strategic direction of the company. So that is one piece, and it is really getting people a little bit more sensitized about what they are saying. So it's basically debunking what is happening in meetings. If you as a leader have upgraded yourself and you have adopted a new mindset, you can easily point out patterns that are repetitive, and you can put it in the room and say, well, maybe we want to reframe this. And every team or every company even has what we call limiting beliefs. And you find that everywhere. It's like before people even entertain thinking about something, it's like, oh, we've tried that before. Oh no, we failed at that 10 times. Oh no, you don't even waste your time. Oh no, I don't want to talk to that person because they're always negative. That's and even industries have that. Well, we've done that for 100 years. Why should we change anything? Well, that's not exactly helping innovation. And the first thing is to really make these things visible in a gentle way, by somebody who is really more of a facilitator than being a co-conspirator, because it is so easy to get just infected. If you are in a room with 10 people and you're the only one thinking a little bit different and thinking, well, maybe we should just think about that for a minute. You're getting rolled over if you're not secure in yourself, and you just keep to yourself what you wanted to say. It's like, all right, yeah, never mind. No one listens to me anyhow, So, so much for fostering collective intelligence. You really need to have a couple of people who are the Trojan horse, if you will, who are starting to do things a little bit differently, and are persistent and also excited about this new direction.
So let me ask you, how do you cultivate a growth mindset, especially when you're dealing with siloed departments?
So again, start with the leader. If I go in and do transformation work for departments or companies, I would pick a leader in each of the core departments and train them up in the new mindset. And we have a 6-module training that's largely self-paced, that has a lot of reflective exercises in there where you're really digging a little bit deeper within yourself. It starts with finding out what my personal values are and what values are informing how I communicate and how I execute. So that is the foundation. We always look at what the values for the company are, or oh my God, but we hardly ever look at, what is really driving me. And that is something so universal that it has informed our entire career, who we are as a person, really. And it is an anchor that we largely overlook that we can activate a lot more. So on top of these values, we start looking at what are limiting beliefs that may have been ingrained in us subconsciously by how we grew up or what happened to us along the way. And we look at habits and thought patterns. We give very simple frameworks on how we can debunk ourselves and really, as a practice, start reflecting more, pausing more before we react. Take a little bit of a breath and say, well, wait a minute, what just happened here, before you engage and do something different. And then we look at what really is my superpower. What am I really good at? If I look back on my track of achievements and also failures, what was my role for the most part? And to really bring that out and make aware what we are really good at. Maybe we are the peacemaker or the communicator, and really put that front and center. And from there, we shape what we call a new self-image of how we think about ourselves. Because what I have learned along my career is that people have always seen me in a much higher regard than I had seen myself. And I'm sure a lot of people can totally relate to that. So I was given opportunities to step into that other people thought I was ready for, but I thought I wasn't. So, that misalignment is causing a lot of friction. And it certainly is not about, inflating ego or anything. It just is about seeing yourself in a clear light and really thriving towards who you could be if you were using your superpower in the best possible way. And we also teach a lot of very simple collaboration, techniques, how to engage, how to also find out what the core values of your team are or your project team. So you can start not just improving yourself, but we also give very simple tools on how you can start little by little improving your collaboration within the team.
Excellent. And really, I think that growth mindset tends to be the cornerstone for you when it comes to really kind of cultivating that growth mindset. What are some of the frameworks or rituals that you do to create that mindset, to develop it?
It's not a one-off thing. It's not something that you are, reading about and you're walking through a workbook and then it's done. This is a continuous practice. And that's what a lot of people underestimate, because it is a constant thing that you always hone, you start looking at. And once you are bringing your attention to it, it's easier to spot patterns. And then it starts becoming more of a game, right? And one of the simpler frameworks we teach people is, something happens in a meeting that really pushes your button, and it's like, okay, so take a breath, pause, think about what is happening now, what is the thought in my head, and what is it triggering. So it is more of a debunking or making visible what is going on subconsciously, and that's when you can start rewiring and changing. And it's like, okay, so how do I want to be going forward? How do I want to twist this limiting belief that is underlying here, or that habit that's not serving me anymore? So we make it very, very practical. And I've developed that after taking, endless courses everywhere and trying to understand how this works, and can somebody give me a building plan? That's because, hey, at the end of the day, I'm German and I'm an IT person. So it's like, hey, can you give me a step-by-step guide here? No one was able to give me that, so I developed my own. And a big piece is you need people around you who are actually embracing and living this mindset that you are still growing into. And that is why it is so important to have a community of people who are wired in the same way. So I think that's the biggest piece, that you need to surround yourself with people that are actually a little bit ahead of you. And you really need to be very mindful of the naysayers. And that is not easy sometimes, because there are as many of them.
Barbara, let's talk about digital wisdom and practice. Now, the Digital Wisdom Collective, you work with so many different clients and different organizations out there. Without revealing any type of secrets or anything like that, do you have examples of, real digital wisdom that's put into practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of examples on how people excelled in the middle. That's my favorite topics, because that's always the best transformation stories. So in one example, a test manager in an organization, she felt like a total imposter because she wasn't coming, from an IT background. And she was sort of, the last one in the food chain. She was always getting the pressure, as we all know. And she was like, I don't know if this is for me. So she went through the mindset training, and our peer circle were with the result that she really turned around from being a victim and the last one in the food chain to really being a creator. And she came up with a concept to build out her department, to get more structured, to get more streamlined, and to really make it a strategic asset in every initiative that was going through the company. So she has totally turned it around, and instead of waiting for a promotion to happen, for something, for strategy to change, she took matters in her own hands, and I really loved seeing that. So now she got headcount, she's building out her department, and the delivery quality of initiatives has gone up to the highest point they've ever had. So that is one piece. Another example would be a head of IT that went through the program, and as you can see, it's like we take all hierarchy levels who feel called for it, and he felt pushed in a corner, and like I need to grease the machine and make things happen, and I don't know how to actually step into strategy. And by going through the mindset training, he now has a better communication line to the top leadership, and people come and talk to him. And actually, through changing himself, he really invited communications. And the co-creation happened naturally for him, where he is now in a place where he doesn't have to do it alone anymore, and he can really spread the load. Another example that I found pretty magical, head of UX design, very talented in seeing the full picture of an organization, stepped into an entirely new role in the organization that was more commercial focused, that she would have never done, because she found that her superpower is leadership and really leading people. So she stepped out of her known profession, and she is now excelling and actually building new revenue streams and business for the company that she has been with for a long time. But for example, HR would have never showed her that road forward. It had to come from her to really see the opportunity.
And I can imagine a lot of listeners right now are asking this important question. And they're saying, for my business or my organization, what are ways that we can audit related to digital transformation our human infrastructure? Do you have a few that you'd want to share out there to audit, how to conduct an audit?
Yeah, so we have developed a maturity assessment that not just looks at the human infrastructure, but at your entire system. And from there, we would make suggestions on what is the best path forward, because we do certainly want to avoid, picking up the wrong rock and turning it around. So we basically have a 4-week, what we call an ecosystem sprint, where we look at the health of the organization. We do a couple of interviews. It's a low barrier offer, but then you know where you stand. And we also give you 3 suggestions on what is the low-hanging fruit that you can go forward with and change.
So when you complete your audit, are there tools and strategies for embedding wisdom into workflows?
Well, wisdom cannot be trained; it grows, really. So it is a long game. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. But you can certainly start with small aspects and pieces, and the first thing to start with would actually be values. What are dig up what are really the core values for the organization, and make them come alive again, and give them meaning, and also use them as a guiding light when it comes to AI ethics. How you make decisions. It can serve in so many ways, and it in a very simple way, where we are a little over engineering sometimes, and it's like, oh, I need a governance framework. Yes, you need that, but then there's also a step in between, of what people can grasp and understand and buy into.
So when it comes to global and generational perspectives, at the beginning of the opening of this podcast, you talked about that you grew up in Germany, obviously in Europe, and then you transported here into the United States. You, among a lot of listeners out there, do recognize that there are so many cross-cultural challenges that exist in all the different regions of the globe right now. And these challenges also do impact digital transformation. In what ways do you see that cross-cultural challenges impacting digital transformation?
It is a lot of assumptions that are not talked about. That's how I see it. Every cultural foundation has a little bit of a different angle, has different standards and morals they grew up with, has different communication barriers or rules. So what I see a lot why things are failing is because there is no space where assumptions can be put on the table. And that being said, assumptions through the hierarchy of the organizations. When you talk to a board member, the assumption would be, well, of course we need AI. We're going to be dead without it. And you kind of go down the food chain, and you have different angles as you go along, and you need to combine all these things. First of all, you need to put them out on the table, and then it's like, okay, so where do we go from here? So what is our truth, and how can we move forward? So it really is having courageous conversations and building the safe spaces where those can be had. That is one piece. But that being said, it really, we are talking about mature adults in the room, right? So that's why it is so important that a certain amount of leaders are going through the mindset work and are able to then be more of a facilitator and not be tangled up in those differences. So yeah, I mean, we are a global world. We're always going to have different viewpoints, and it really is a matter of how we go about it. And just coming from Germany and being now here in the US, very different aspects of things. while the Germans totally overplan and want to make things 150% proof before they start. You would have the other extremes here, where it's like, oh, let's try this out, let's fail. This is great. Coming from Europe, that's sometimes a scary thing. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like, hold on a minute. Can we just talk about this? So it's just understanding how the others are functioning, and it comes back to being a good listener. Also, if you look at different generations, and to me it's interesting because whatever conference I go to, the Gen Zs are made out to be so bad, and I don't see that, because they are bringing an angle that makes me think, as somebody who's old, in their mind. But I need to be open to listen to that perspective. And yes, they may be coming in hot and making demands and such, but then I also have to be truthful to myself and say, well, I was working a lot when I was climbing up the ladder, and they are right at questioning if this is really a sustainable way of doing it. It's not like things have to be falling into your lap, but is there a different way? And that to me is a very courageous question to ask. And also, how are we most productive? And their demand of wanting to have purpose and meaning and really understanding why things are done, to me, is very clever. I mean, hey, I was raised in a generation where it was like, well, whatever your boss is telling you, you better, go execute on it. And you got to work hard, and, blood, sweat, and tears. And if you work hard enough, you're going to get somewhere. And maybe that's not the way anymore. What if things could be easy? What if things could be easy, but we all have to work together? And we all have to use also our generational strengths to the fullest. But that also would mean that the older generation needs to get a little bit wiser, not be disgruntled anymore about things that didn't go so well, opportunities that passed, careers they never, made shiny as they had intended in the younger years. We have to be at peace with where we are, so we can get better guides for the next generation. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and there is such an immense opportunity laying there. And I really love talking to younger people who are just coming up in the ranks, and I can learn a ton. Being older, I don't think I know everything. God, I'm still learning every day, and it's good when I get questioned and when I get something that makes me think. That's what I love. So I think age is overrated in both directions, and wisdom doesn't really have a label that goes with age. We think that older people are wise. What I see, that's not the case.
All right, Barbara, we're going to wrap this up, and I'm going to ask you a couple insight questions of you related to your top 3 mindset blockers in digital transformation. What would you say those 3 mindset blockers are?
This is an IT issue. That's the biggest piece. It's not our problem. It's an IT problem. So that is a huge blocker. It is technology is part of every company's DNA, if you want it or not, and that needs to kind of sink in for people. So it is a leadership problem. It's not an IT problem. The IT person can facilitate and can bring information to the table, but everyone in the C-suite and the top management needs to be responsible. The other misconception is that training is an HR issue. It's not. If you are starting a technology project, everyone needs to get together and say, who do we have? Where do we have gaps? What really is missing to make this successful? So the alignment between HR and IT needs to be constant. They need to be attached to the hip. This whole grappling of whose budget is it I would can that entirely and say human infrastructure upgrade needs to be a permanent OPEX line in the IT budget. So that's the second one. And the third one would be, this is easy. We can do it in 2 months. Yeah, others have done it. Why can't we do it? So starting with an immense amount of pressure from C-level before you've even started out of the gate. If a consultancy comes in this way and says, oh yeah, this is easy, we can finish it in a couple of months, I would question that choice massively. So you want people who are actually giving you the real talk and are planning realistically. So let's talk realistic numbers, in time needed, in budget needed, in people needed. There is such a huge fear out there to always, powder coated, and it's like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. Oh, of course we can make it with 1 million less. Oh yeah, we happily take that budget cut. Not a problem. So no, let's be realistic, and let's also slice it into pieces that are digestible. We don't always have to do the big hunk of everything. Another one I want to throw on the table is, it's going to be easy because we're going to do it agile. And that to me is the kiss of death. If you are, as an organization, have not acted agile in any way before, and somebody marches in and says, we're going to do agile now, ain't going to happen. So the method needs to match your culture. And that's very important. There is no right or wrong. There is no happy or sad. It needs to fit the people and the culture. So don't let anyone push you over with, this is how you ought to do it, and otherwise this is going to fail.
So let me ask you this next question. All that we cover today, one book, one ritual, or one question that every leader should ask from you, what would that be?
The question for every leader is, why are we doing this? And why are we doing this now? And if no one can answer to that question, bad. I would question that priority then. That is, yeah. And just make this part of your meetings. Always, if no one can answer that, then it's bad. The other ritual that I would highly recommend, because we start initiatives, projects, and we do the big hoopda in a kickoff meeting, and we say, ooh, this is where we want to go, and yay. I would make one slide for every meeting, and I would repeat why we're doing this and what we're shooting for, what we're trying to achieve. And I would make this a part of the first slide of every meeting, repeat it, remind everyone, because it will kill a lot of discussions that are not serving the purpose. And that's also how you can nip this entire scope creep a little bit in the butt, if you constantly remind yourself what the end product ought to be.
Excellent. And then also, in closing this out, what do you wish more executives, what they understood about digital wisdom?
That it is not a one-off shot. It is a continuous practice, and it really is a leadership paradigm, a leadership muscle that is needed today to make your organization and your digital transformations successful. It is not a nice to have. It will become a critical skill to have to build your human infrastructure, and at the end of the day, to save yourself a lot of money. For everyone who's gone through the training, the numbers we have is they save about 20% of external consulting cost. So basically, for every dollar you invest, you save 5. And that, I think, is a pretty good ROI to have these days.
In closing out this episode and this interview, I would just basically want to share with everyone that it's super critical to make sure that you do have the human infrastructure, because if you are missing the human infrastructure, it's going to, in most cases, it's going to derail your digital initiatives. Barbara, what call to action do you have for the listeners?
My call to action would be to take a little bit of a step back and look at all the portfolio you have planned for 2026, all the magical things that you have on the agenda. And I would do a reality check at the start of the year to say, okay, so if we're truthful with ourselves, what really is important and what can our organization handle and what really has the highest dollar impact at the end of the day? Or is it maybe some ego-driven thing that no one needs? That would be my advice. Declutter your garage. Look at it before the year actually gets into full swing.
That's great advice. So everyone, in the episode description, I will have links to the Digital Wisdom Collective and other links as well, and information regarding Barbara and how to contact, and also to how to get in touch and learn a little bit more about Digital Wisdom Collective. In closing, Barbara, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would want to share before we close out the episode?
No, this has been amazing, and thanks for having me as a guest. Great conversation, and I hope you listeners can take away a couple of ideas.
Beautiful, beautiful. Barbara, thank you so much. And for everyone, please make sure that you are following and also too sharing this content with others. The Digital Transformation with Jim Kunkel is available on all platforms for you. So make sure you do give it a follow and you do share the content. Thank you, everyone.